Today marks 1 year since the Supreme Court of Ghana delivered the most awaited election petition verdict declaring John Mahama as legitimate winner of the 2012 presidential elections. Now, 1 year on, what is the verdict now?
They took the whole people of Ghana, they held us hostage for almost 8 months, so they can afford to mourn. We rather want to reflect on what happened and how we should not allow this to happen again, and that after every election, people should know how to accept victory. Whether you lose or you win, you must allow the system to move on.
That is the populist verdict. What about the intellectual verdict?
The judgments of the majority in that case have left us with more questions than answers, creating more uncertainty about the legal standards for conducting a valid presidential election in Ghana, or for successfully challenging the validity of a declared result. Such uncertainty, as well as the lingering perception following the 2013 petition that a judicial challenge to a presidential election has rather very poor prospects, does not augur well for the peaceful and orderly conduct of elections in Ghana. Instead of giving us clarity and certainty on the law of elections and election petitions, what we got from the Supreme Court majority were some recommendations.
So how has the final ruling changed the face of politics in our country? Have we learned any governance lessons yet? And moving on, how must our political structures change or reshape towards a more trusted governance system? This is today's big story with me, Stephen Enti. Today's big story is brought to you in association with nationwide PVC suppliers and fabricators of high-grade UPVC doors and windows. Now, a year ago, the whole world focused its lenses on Ghana's Supreme Court, which had a huge responsibility to declare the sitting president winner of the previous year's elections, or yank him out of office to be replaced by the opposition leader, Nana Akufo-Addo, who had lost the election but challenged the results in an 8-month tussle at the Supreme Court. But a year on, political functionaries of the ruling NDC still feel the opposition New Patriotic Party shouldn't have bothered to go to court at all.
This country was probably plunged into a state of anxiety, where you could remember that everybody was behind the television set and the radio sets, and the whole country was quiet, waiting for the verdict of the Supreme Court. So I think today should rather be a day of reflection, that how far have we come since 29 August 2013. And I believe what we are experiencing today, all the turbulences we are experiencing today, is as a result of the 8 months that we spent in litigating. Today is a day for us to go out to the public, have a discussion. There are so many problems, find how best we can alleviate the problems that are going in the country. So I believe that is the best thing that the NDC today will do. We've asked our people to go into the midst of the people, do clean-up exercises and that kind of thing to give hope and a belief that this country will move forward with the NDC.
I am told that the NPP in the Ashanti region, they are mourning to mark the day.
Well, they can choose to mourn. They took the whole people of Ghana, they held us hostage for almost 8 months, so they can afford to mourn. We rather want to reflect on what happened and how we should not allow this to happen again, and that after every election, people should know how to accept victory. Whether you lose or you win, you must allow the system to move on.
Professor at Sutton Hall University, Professor Kwesi Prempeh, however, feels different. He delivered a keynote address at a public forum in Accra today.
The majority judgment in the 2013 presidential petition case is regrettably of dubious value. But beyond its apparent uselessness for teachers and students of constitutional law, the judgment of the Supreme Court did little to bring clarity or certainty in how our elections must be conducted, or even in how to mount a successful challenge in court in the event of a disputed election. The judgments of the majority in that case have left us with more questions than answers, creating more uncertainty about the legal standards for conducting a valid presidential election in Ghana, or for successfully challenging the validity of a declared result. Such uncertainty, as well as the lingering perception following the 2013 petition that a judicial challenge to a presidential election has rather very poor prospects does not augur well for the peaceful and orderly conduct of elections in Ghana. Instead of giving us clarity and certainty on the law of elections and election petitions, what we got from the Supreme Court majority were some recommendations. And I suppose those recommendations have in fact been taken seriously by some, including the organizers of this forum. Unfortunately, those recommendations are bereft of legal authority. When a court means to compel a party that is subject to its jurisdiction to take or refrain from taking certain actions, it proceeds by way of an order addressed to that party. It does not make recommendations. The Supreme Court's recommendations in this case, then, are what lawyers would call mere dicta. They are analogous to a non-binding advice, but this is not to say that the recommendations are themselves bad. It is to simply say that in and of themselves, those recommendations cannot compel the EC to do those things that have been recommended. And with an EC such as we have, you need more than recommendations to get it to act.
On to the telephone line, Dr. Alidu Seidu is a political science lecturer at the University of Ghana. He joins us now. Good evening, sir, and thanks for joining us.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Now, you've heard the two viewpoints. I mean, the viewpoint from the NDC and the viewpoint from Professor Kwesi Prempeh, who had some issues to raise about the whole outcome itself. The NDC is of the opinion that the MPP shouldn't have even bothered to go to court, and that the MPP actually held the whole country at ransom. Professor Prempeh raised some key intellectual issues. Your reactions?
Yeah, I think, first of all, if we look at the concept of electoral fraud, it is as old as the 19th century BC. And Ghana as a country have faced, since independence, have faced allegations of electoral fraud. The only time we have taken a concerted effort was in 1992 when the MPP wrote the stolen verdict and boycotted the parliamentary election that followed. And also in 2004, when Rojo Nono Mensa led the NDC to challenge the 2004 election. But all these were not well organized and meticulously done as in 2012. So the fact that we have decided as people to use one of the institutions of democracy, that is the judiciary, to fight alleged electoral fraud, rather than using the gun, shows that we are matured in terms of democratic dispensation.
Right.
So I wouldn't agree to the fact that the MPP as a party took the whole country to ransom by petitioning the electoral, result.
Okay.
It was one of the democratic deepening exercises.
Okay, Dr. Seidu, so would you say that the final verdict has taught us any governance or political lessons at all?
Yeah, to some extent. The verdict and the way it was received shows that Ghana is, to some extent, consolidating on its democratic gain. Most of the 9 Supreme Court judges recommended some form of reform for electoral processes. For example, if you look at Justice Atuguba, for example, he called for the early compilation of the voters' register so that all stakeholders can look at it and dispute at that particular point when they think there is a problem. He talks about the simplification of the pink sheet so that electoral officers can fill them under pressure without making a lot of mistakes. And several other things. Justice Judicial called for better management of the serial numbers and also better training of the electoral officers. But beyond that, I think we need more attitudinal reform as people, just going beyond what the Supreme Court judges have called. For example, in Ghana during election time, when even the stakes are very high, you look at political parties and also the media having unregulated reportage and even power tabulation and calling of the results, even when the EC, which is the official mandated institution, has not even called the winner of the election. We have delegitimization of our electoral processes by political parties, by accusing each other of over-registering or registering minors, accusing the EC of supporting or taking an action to support one particular person.
Dr. Alidu Seidu. Dr. Ali Desaido, I'll quickly pause you. I've been joined on the other telephone line by former Attorney General under the MPP regime, Ayikwe Otu. He's driving, so we need to quickly get to him before we lose him. Good evening, sir, and thanks for joining us. We lost Ayikwe Otu. Ayikwe Otu is former Attorney General. He's a leading member of the MPP, and he will be joining us later when we'll raise him on the phone. So let's go back to you, Dr. Ali Desaido. You were making a point, but let me interject and ask you, one of the key issues that have come forward from the position that was mooted by Professor Kwesi Prempeh is that the verdict, the final ruling of the Supreme Court actually made key recommendations. You've raised them. But beyond just recommendations, these have not been binding enough to force the Electoral Commission to do what was recommended, electoral reforms. Your views about that?
Yeah, I very much agree with him. Because the electoral processes is such a tricky process. Even if I admit that there is a challenge or there is a problem with the electoral processes, and it favors me, notwithstanding the challenge, I may find it not compelling enough to institute measures that will change it. For example, if I'm the winner of an election or a process which is deemed not to be fair.
Dr. Ali Desaido, quickly, I beg your pardon. I apologize because Ayikwe Otu is in a situation we might lose him if we don't get him. So we'll take him quickly and we'll return to you. So good evening, sir. Nia Ayikwe Otu. Thanks for joining us.
Good evening.
Now, so within this year, has the MPP done any form of introspection or reflection of events before the petition at the Supreme Court, and whether indeed you feel every step or advice was the best?
Well, if you do recall, after the Supreme Court verdict, we actually set up a three-member committee of attorneys general, past attorney generals of the MPP, and we did a review of the Supreme Court verdict. We looked at the recommendations that the Supreme Court made, and we also made our recommendations to the party. I do recall also that the party set up a committee to look at electoral reforms, and some of the issues raised were sent to the EC during the IPAC deliberation. And one of the very serious recommendations we made was that the IPAC thing looks like more administrative than legal. That the parties would come in, meet with the EC, have a JoyNews, and then at the end of the day, the EC can decide what to take and what to leave out, because the EC is bound by the constitutional instrument and the electoral laws by which he works, and not necessarily by IPAC meeting understanding. So we recommended that the issues that are settled at IPAC be incorporated into a constitutional instrument to be used and to be binding on the EC during elections.
Right. Now, there were many who were concerned at the time about the country descending into, let me put it this way, gutters if the MPP lost the petition. 1 year back, do you feel the MPP possibly was to blame for the negative perception some people held of them?
Not at all. It was unfortunate if anybody held that view, because if we wanted to throw the country into a state of confusion, then we should have rather gone onto the street and taken to cutlasses, machetes, and cudgels, and guns and things, as happened in some countries in West Africa, which we all saw, leading to some countries, one country being divided into northern and southern parts and all that.
But we
didn't do that. The Constitution, provides for presidential petitions, and that was all that we did. So why is anybody complaining?
Yeah, but these cutlasses and cudgels surfaced at the party headquarters recently when some aggrieved members almost attacked the chairman. So
that had to do with the party's own issues, which has got nothing to do with the country.
Okay.
Because the way you put it was that we were endangering the stability of the country, which is wrong. I mean, squabbles here and there, Boku, they've been fighting all the time. As this Ghana burning because you have problems in the north.
No.
We keep on having those problems. I mean, these are skirmishes that do occur. But to say that what we did amounted to maybe, endangering the peace of Ghana, I beg to differ.
Right. And now, as a prominent and experienced member of the judiciary, how would you describe the effects that the petition had on the confidence in the judiciary?
Well, you see, for the first time, the proceedings were televised live. So for most people who had no idea of what takes place in court, at least they had the opportunity to follow the proceedings. And then there were commentaries being run by lawyers on the side and all that, news file and, Metro TV, TV3. So it rather opened up the judiciary to, people who had no idea of how the judiciary operates.
Right.
And I think it's rather a feather in the cap of
the judiciary.
Chief Justice who decided that this thing be televised live. And recently, we saw in the trial, in the Pistorius trial in South Africa, that there was also the decision to telecast it live around the world.
Right.
So it rather helped to boost the, if you like, the standing or the image of the judiciary.
Right.
More than anything else.
Nia Ikwotu, we are very grateful for your time. Nia Ikwotu is a former Attorney General. We still have Dr. Alidu Seidu, a political science lecturer at the University of Ghana, still on the line. So, Dr. Alidu Seidu, I apologize for cutting you in at the time that we got Ikwotu. Now, my key concern now is that 1 year on after this verdict, the NDC and the MPP both have positions about it. The NDC still maintains that the 8 months that it took the whole country to be fixated about a possible outcome is partly the reason why the government has not been able to achieve some of its key targets. The MPP will think different. Now, in the midst of all these, what should the Ghanaian who observe these proceedings be thinking about in terms of how to shape a proper democratic structure for years ahead, including the next election, 2016?
Yeah, I think every Ghanaian wants a better life, a better future, and a life that is worthy of living. And we cannot have such a life that we aspire to live if we don't have a government that is validly elected and that governs very well. Good governance starts with even the process of election. If you are not elected very well, you lose one important factor, which is legitimacy. And you cannot govern well without the people's legitimacy. So I believe that what Ghanaians should be calling for is for both government and all stakeholders concerned in this particular exercise to make sure that we have a level playing field in terms of what? Reforms that will shape the country's democratic future, and also reforms that will make people have confidence in the institutions and systems that run elections. Because without that particular confidence, Ghanaians will always doubt the verdict of our electoral processes, and where there is that doubt, it will cast a lot of doubt on the legitimacy of the person elected, and also may provoke people to use illegitimate means of trying to come to power if they think that the legitimate means is highly skewed in favor of a particular party. Reform is not something easy, because no matter how you look at it, some people will benefit from a system, whether it is even or unjust. So if you are going to reform, it means that the beneficiary is going to lose the advantageous position that he commands earlier on. So definitely he's going to put up a fight. So we need to come together and dialogue over this. I always believe that no matter what reform we are going to initiate and implement, it must be based on consensus and it must be based on a stakeholder decision. No person should impose reform on the other.
Right, Dr. Alidu Seidu, we're grateful for your time. On the other line, we have Dr. Emmanuel Akwete, Executive Director of IDA. Good evening, sir, and thanks for joining us.
Good evening.
Now, what would you say, you know, should go into any kind of reflection of this landmark ruling? I mean, if you were NDC or MPP, what would be your point or points of reflection?
Well, my point of reflection is clearly that it was the day, the reaction to the verdict demonstrated our commitment to the rule of law and to peace and stability. We may have differences or different points of view on the verdict and the direction it took. But if you look throughout the country, the decision was accepted and we abided by it. It is one of the highest norms of democracy and the rule of law. There are processes, there are structures, there are institutions that decide on conflict.
And would you
when they rule, once it's accepted that that's the final authority on the matter, we abide.
And would you say
we didn't take to the streets, and that demonstration of commitment to the norm was extremely important.
Right. So would you say our governance system is any better?
There was no way the verdict on its own would make our governance system better or stronger. What it did was that it pointed out weaknesses in the system, weaknesses, predominantly administrative weaknesses that needed to be dealt with expeditiously ahead of the 2016 elections. And it did that in an authoritative manner because the investigation was thorough, and when they outlined what needed to be done, it was clear that the system hadn't been, as we all thought, foolproof because we went biometric. And therefore, they pointed out where strengthening could take place.
Right. I mean, this brings me to my next question, where there have been calls for electoral reforms. I mean, the ruling brought out key recommendations, as Professor Kwesi Prempeh puts it. Now, how content are you with the attempt at reforms or reforms in general so far?
You know, INEC works together with the Civic Forum Initiative, which is a grouping of many of the largest member-based organizations in all sectors, the religious groups, Christian, Muslim, trade unions. Lately, Bar Association, Ghana Medical Association, and many organized labor are also playing a role in what we're doing. And for us, we've done two things. The Electoral Commission, soon after the verdict, wrote to us, as they did to other organizations, and I believe they put an advert in the newspaper giving 2 months or 3, calling for proposals on dealing with the problems, electoral reforms. As Ghanaians, we have essentially understood electoral reforms to be administrative reforms. So if you look at it from about 1994, every election is followed by some administrative reforms. So we've made some proposals. For instance, we think, and it is something I didn't listen to the entire lecture by Professor Prempeh, but we think that the issue of no verification, no vote was a very controversial thing. At the end, it was the source of a major problem. And therefore, we feel that law ought to be looked at, and we have to find ways in which rights of people will be respected. We made recommendations on that. We think the way the EC recruited people the last minute to be presiding officers and agents and so on and so forth without thorough training and without, schooling them properly and understanding the sensitivities around their performance and so on was problematic. We think that probably the EC should begin building a reserve army of such officials using national service people, civil society people, and that the presence or the reliance on party agents and so on ought to be balanced in a way so that we would have the relevant checks and balances strengthened. We think about many other things that the EC should do to reform administratively the system, improving upon its efficiency, and also its funding, and the need for us to see that EC is a state institution with the sole authority to manage elections. And I think we need to also help the EC to build up to a point where the confidence in them, but also respect for its authority, helps us also abide by its rulings. it looks like we've moved into a situation where every decision of the EC is being challenged, by the actors. Today it could be MPP, tomorrow it could be NDC. And we are having to bring in a lot of civic action to help manage elections and the electoral process. It's not good enough. We think we have to review and we need to strengthen how multiplicity of factors or so-called civic groups come into the process. So that is the administrative front. I've just given you a gist of it.
Yes.
But more profoundly, we want the electoral system, particularly the electoral cycle, regulated. We want it reformed. There are too many elections. We also think that which take place over all the 4 years. We also want the political parties to be regulated in terms of their electoral activities and assisted to begin looking more at the development issues so that the pressure on the presidency could be reduced or diffused by distributing executive power at the local level, what we call devolution and party elections. So for us, there are a lot more things to be done to strengthen our electoral democracy than I thought they were not fully spelled out. And Professor Prempeh didn't have to. But I think if you look at the various proposals that will come up subsequently, we have a broader view of things.
Right. Dr. Emmanuel Akwete, we're grateful. Emmanuel Akwete is Executive Director of the Institute of Democratic Governance. And that's where we draw the curtains for today's big story.